Inside the function, we don't need to define our try-catch blocks since we're using express async errors. So the first filter we're going to be looking at is allowing the user to filter the featured cars. So that would be the cars that have the featured property set to true. So the first thing we need to do is extract featured from the request.query. So if the user enters featured equals true, we're going to get true. And if they enter featured equals false, we're going to get false. The next thing we're going to define is something called a query object. And initially, we're going to set it equal to an empty object. So how we're going to be using this object is inside our model. So our model is car. We have the find function. And inside the find function, we can pass in different properties. So if we passed in featured is true, then this is going to find all the cars with featured set to true. And if featured is false, it's going to find all the cars that are not featured. So what we're going to be making is inside the query object, we're going to have different properties and the value that the user has entered. And finally, we're going to pass this query object to our find function. So before we do all that, we need to import our model. So we're going to have car, and we're going to require from the models folder the car file. Another thing we have to handle is the featured attribute may or may not be defined by the user. So to check if the user has included the featured attribute inside the path, what we can do is have a simple if condition, and we're going to pass in featured. So this means featured is defined. And inside the if statement, we're going to be building our query object. So inside our query object, we're going to add a new key called featured. And for the value, we're going to set it equal to true or false. So if featured is equal to true, then we're going to set it to true, else we're going to set it to false. Once we have our query object, we can use the find function. So we're going to await car.find, and we're going to pass in our query object. And whatever is returned, we're going to store it in a variable called cars. Once we have our cars, we're going to send a response with the status of 200, which means successful. And we're going to respond with a JSON. And for the JSON, we're going to pass in two attributes. The first is going to be the number of hits,